Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Emergency Exit, where we'll be talking about how to retain your employees and prevent burnout. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Jessica Mace, HR and Wellbeing Advisor at Westfield Health, and I'm joined by an expert panel consisting of Kathy Lawson, Independent Workplace Health and Wellbeing Consultant, Trainer and Coach. We've got Vicky Walker, Director of HR at Westfield Health. And last but not least, we've got Karen Jackson, HR Director at Reed. I will just touch quickly on some housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded and you have joined us in listen-only mode, but you will receive the recording afterwards. Handouts are in the download section that you can access at any time throughout the webinar. During the webinar, we'll be asking some poll questions to get an understanding of our audience's experiences. The polls are completely anonymous and optional, but we will share the overall results after each one, which I'm sure you'll find really interesting. There will be time at the end to ask the speakers your questions, but please put them in the chat box and we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can towards the end. And finally, a survey should appear on your screens at the end of the webinar, so it would be great if you could give us your feedback, as it really helps us develop any future webinars that we do put on. So in terms of what we'll be covering today, we'll be touching on the current employee retention and recruitment crisis in the UK. We'll be understanding more around what job seekers are looking for from an employer in the post-pandemic world, how employers can create a wellbeing culture that retains and attracts their people, and finally, some tips for managers to prevent burnout within their team. So on this slide here are some interesting facts and statistics from recent research, and actually reading and hearing some of these feels like a reminder to us all as employees to take action quickly regarding retaining our employees. So we asked 1,500 people from across the UK about their attitudes to job changes, mental health and burnout, and this slide presents some of those key findings. So as you'll see on there, we've got 59% say that mental health is driving them to change jobs. 16 million workers plan to change jobs in the next 6 months at a cost of 48.2 billion to UK businesses.
Jess, sorry to interrupt you. I don't think the slides moved on. I don't think you can see the statistics.
Oh no, sorry, apologies.
Yeah.
Can you see that now?
Perfect. Yeah.
Great. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
So we've got over half the workforce, 51% feel that they're less than a month away from burnout, and 83% would stay if their employer made some changes. So some really thought-provoking stats in there that we may want to consider and understand more. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen with you now. Apologies, this is running a little bit slow at my end. Hopefully you can't see that anymore. But what I am going to share is a poll with you. And please remember this is anonymous, but we are really intrigued to hear from you. So hopefully this should pop up. Very soon. So since the pandemic started, has employee turnover within your organisation increased, decreased, or stayed about the same? Getting some very quick responses in there, which is really interesting. Give it a couple more seconds. It is still collating the responses at the minute, but we're seeing a strong 60% of people saying that more people have left. And I can share those on my screen with you very shortly.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, that was in. So I was just going to ask the panel if there's anything anyone wants to comment on there or we're interested to see.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the balance as tipped at the top there, where more people have left. I think that's. I don't think I'm surprised actually by that.
No, I'm not surprised either with the pandemic and the impact that that's having.
Okay, so what we'll do now is head over to our expert panel to hear more from you guys. So we will start with you, Vicky, if that's okay. So Vicky, as Director of HR at Westfield Health, what stood out most when you first read the report, and what do you think HR teams should be focusing on as their top priority right now?
I think it's really interesting, Jess. I'm not sure if we can still see the poll, actually. I don't know if you're able to stop sharing that, that'd be great. But I think it is really interesting, Jess, that when we look at the report, maybe people thought initially it'd be about people want more money. But actually, I think what the pandemic has done is allowed people to pause. They felt very vulnerable in their life. They've paused and considered about what's really important. And I think then it's made them consider about their roles and sort of what they expect out of a career and out of a job role. So I think now employees are expecting that we do more to support wellbeing. So wellbeing and flexible working is just as important as pay now. And I think it's important that as employers we ensure we address that, because people have had this time to pause and reflect about kind of what they want from their jobs and their employers, and it's not just like it used to be about money. It's so much more than that now. I don't know if Kathy, Karen want to add anything to that.
I was just gonna build on that and just say, and I think you're right, Vicky, and it's not just a fruit basket anymore. You know, it's not just let's get you an ergonomic chair and a bit of a fruit basket, because I think they're missing the point if they're only focusing in those areas. I think there's much more to it now about organisations taking responsibility for well-being. So
I also think that it's no longer a build, so and/or, it's a both. So you're not saying it's not either pay or it's health and well-being or it's something else. It's pay is now equally as important as mental health and well-being. So it's not, you can't stop one and turn one on. You know, you've now got to keep both going, kind of thing. So it's extra pressure on employees now to spin lots of different plates.
Yeah, definitely.
And just while we're on you, Karen, the report found that 16 million workers are looking to change jobs within the next 6 months, which could potentially cost businesses. I think the numbers on there were 48 billion. So what changes have you seen within the recruitment industry? And can you talk us through some of the trends that employees are looking for from an employer now compared to pre-COVID?
Sure. I mean, the recruitment industry is really interesting at the moment. It's completely flipped. So I was really interested by those numbers. The market that we're working in right now is a job-rich, candidate-poor market. So actually, there's more jobs out there and less candidates to match to those vacancies that we've got. So it's really interesting to read that actually that might change again in the near future, if that, you know, that is true. Our recruitment consultants' role now is very different to pre-pandemic to post. So in our business, actually, recruitment consultants are having to learn different ways of working because they're used to working in less jobs, candidate-rich markets. So it's easier to find lots of people to fill a vacancy, whereas now it's much harder to find lots of people to fill a vacancy. Also, the market is now much more competitive. So counter offers or multiple offers, which means that employers have really got to think about how they stand out. And usually that's standing out outside of just money, so just package. You know, for example, we recently had an employee who joined us and she went through a process with us. She was counter offered and had multiple offers. And actually the reason why she chose to join Reed is because she felt we invested in her at the recruitment stage and were much more interested in her as an individual at recruitment stage. So again, I think that's really interesting. But again, each person is different. And it's really difficult at recruitment stage to understand people's triggers and motivators because you spend a relatively short period of time with them. I agree with what Vicky said earlier in terms of flexibility is also a big change in terms of location. Those candidates are now looking for either hybrid working or 100% home working coming out of the pandemic. For Reed, that was a big shift. We worked in offices up to the pandemic, and now we're making the shift to hybrid working. But then for a manager, also this brings real challenges on how to manage a hybrid population, when in essence you're managing somebody shoulders up, because that's all you're going to see of them. So again, that brings in real challenges. How do you look out for signals relating to burnout, stress, anxiety, for example's sake? I think people now also post-pandemic are looking for much more of a safe working environment. And the legacy of how the pandemic was handled also impacts on employees choosing whether they want to stay with that organisation or not. Every company went into that pandemic literally hanging on and waiting for government guidance to come in. How they use that guidance, I think, will really help or really drive employees to go, do I want to do that again if we're into the same situation again with this employer? I think the emotional connection to a company has also grown in value and is also increasingly hard in a hybrid working place. So we've got to also look at how we make sure that we emotionally connect our employees to businesses. And I think that's done by having a really clear employee value proposition. You know, I feel understood, I feel autonomous, I feel valued, I feel cared for, and I feel invested. And I think they're really important elements in terms of making sure as a business that you're attractive to those candidates who look like, from the outputs of this report, are going to hit the marketplace soon.
Very interesting, thank you, Karen. And to touch on that, we are going to do another poll now, which I will share on screen. Hopefully that's popped up for you. And the question is around, have you made any organisation changes since the pandemic to try and improve employee retention? And I guess it's just a really interesting question because trying to make changes along with dealing with everything that the kind of pandemic brought for its people. And a couple of mixed responses in at the minute. So interestingly, hopefully you can see that 50% have done around flexible working policy, whether that be time or location or possibly other factors. And then followed by 22% changes to wellbeing initiatives. So yeah, is there anything that any of the panelists are surprised to see there, or is that what would you expect to see?
From my perspective, that completely matches Reed in terms of what we have done in Reed. We have definitely changed our flexible working policy, and we are looking at mental health and wellbeing in a much more robust and regular way than we have been doing in the past. So I would have voted in exactly the same way with regards to that.
I think I echo Karen's point. I'd be really intrigued, just touching on that point, Karen, about mental health, what we all think around, should mental health training be part of an induction? How do we feel that?
I think from our perspective, the roles that some of our consultants are doing at the moment are tough. You know, they're tough roles in a completely flipped market, and we are bringing new consultants into that. We do have lots of content in our LMS around mental health, resilience, work-life balance in a hybrid world, and those types of things. And we actually actively encourage all of our employees to go to those places and look at that content. We do it through a number of different things, whether that's through induction or whether that's through a wellbeing calendar that we've got, but we absolutely put spotlight focus on all of those different things at different points in our employees' careers.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
And
If I can just add into that as well, just something to add is about that question of should it be incorporated into induction. It's like, why wouldn't you? Because if you're trying to build a culture of well-being and focusing on mental health, so it's okay to have conversations about it, then let's start at the beginning when people first join the organisation. So it's great that Reed are already doing that. So.
And we do have another question for you, Vicky. So the report found that 83% of employees would stay if their employer did make changes. So can you talk us through how employers can create a wellbeing culture to retain their employees, as well as using it to attract new staff?
I think, we can get caught up in the language of, culture of wellbeing, and people find it really scary, and wellbeing strategies. And I think first and foremost, don't overcomplicate it. Try and keep it really simple, and don't make assumptions. So talk first to your colleagues, to your new recruits. When you're attracting new people, ask them what it is that they would determine a wellbeing culture is. What is it they want? Don't make assumptions that you think you know what people want regarding wellbeing. I think do it informally, or doing it by just talking, or surveys, or forums. As I said, try and do things that aren't too complicated, but things that can be maintained and they're not just one-off things. So, try and encourage walk-in meetings, downtime, water cooler moments in a hybrid way of working rather than just in the office where people can have time. You might know that they're having lots of problems regarding sleep or resilience or change, so you might be able to put some webinars on those too. I think also remembering that, the old asset that behaviour breeds behaviour, so make sure it's led by the top as well, and that they're being seen that wellbeing is important to your executive team as well. What I would say is when you're recruiting, make sure you talk about it in your recruitment process, that it is a two-way process. Is it the right fit for them? What are they looking for, as well as what you're wanting from a candidate? And I would say one thing we always tend to forget is your managers within your organisation are colleagues too. So don't assume that your managers have got all the answers. They might need that support around wellbeing and how to help when they're going out to recruit, about describing what good wellbeing looks like within an organisation, how seriously you take it. I don't know if Kathy, Karen have got anything that you'd want to input in terms of what you've seen and do.
I think I absolutely advocate and echo your absolutely run away from a one size fits all approach, because it doesn't work, and don't make any assumptions. I've talked very slightly there about the wellbeing calendar earlier, but this is one of the things in Reed that really made a big difference. So we run on 4-week cycles, sales cycles in Reed. So we have created a wellbeing calendar, and every 4 weeks we focus on something different. So that could be financial health, that could be healthy eating, it could be mental health awareness. In November, it's Movember. But what this means is, because we've got a constant rhythm and routine around this, which is known by our employees, they know that every 4 weeks we're going to start talking about a different topic. That topic may or may not be relevant to them, but also may or may not be relevant to people in their life, their friends or their family. And they've started to now trust us because we've got regular rhythm and routine, that this is going to happen. And actually, we've had such amazing feedback. Earlier in the year, we did a step challenge. We had somebody who was doing 25,000 steps a week, which is pretty epic, and doing a day job kind of thing. And we just, wanted to understand why. And he said, get up out in the bed in the morning to clear my head, get ready for work at home. I just go for a big walk, come back, I'm ready. And at the end of the day, I do exactly the same thing. And we've seen so many hints and tips come in. Somebody else gets dressed to work every day, even if they're working at home, and as soon as they're finished, they go and get changed. So they've got that, demarcation between work and home. So for us, it brings a real focus, but also encourages that two-way chat around it in that way. And I think what's really great is to see that the report stat that 59% of responders say that mental health is driving them to change jobs. It's great that they're starting to realise that as an employee, your mental health is incredibly important. Kathy, what tips have you got for employees supporting mental health?
So I think first of all that organisations, as Vicky said there, that managers are important and not to forget them. I think they're also key as well, and it's the way that they manage and interact with staff. And I see it quite a lot that managers don't know how to have the conversations around, particularly around mental health, and particularly when we're working on these type of platforms, because they're ringing somebody up or they're on a Zoom and they're saying, oh, how are you? And then they're terrified if the person goes, well, actually, I'm not okay. You know, because what are they going to do then? They are paid to fix. Often they are paid to find solutions, and so they find it really difficult. So I think supporting the managers to understand that it's actually good practice to have well-being conversations with your people as well as performance, and not to hide behind performance, because people don't suddenly become de-skilled or unknowledgeable overnight. So if people's performance is going down, let's have a bit more of a well-being conversation. Put the performance on one side, because also when you're going to have a conversation about mental health and well-being, people can be frightened, they can be concerned that they're going to be judged, they're going to be stigmatized, discriminated against, they're going to be reviewed poorly, that their performance management scores will go down. So they're frightened of having these conversations. And so the more that managers step forward and have that, then the more that it will start to embed in the culture and become a normal part of management practice. And I think working remotely on these platforms, it requires managers to be more proactive. Because like Karen said, some managers have never met the person that they're managing. So how on earth can they pick up the signs? So they have to be more proactive. They've got to have more conversations. And I think not be afraid to ask perhaps a bit more personal questions, because in society we're very much, I can't possibly ask that because that'll be a bit nosy, you know, and I can't do that. But let me tell you, if you ask a question that someone doesn't want to answer, you'll soon know, you know. But let's not be afraid to say, well, how are you? You know, when did you last see your family? How are you coping with the pandemic? Are you getting enough sleep? Let's not be frightened to ask the very questions that's affecting people's mental health. And managers, don't refer it to HR. Let me tell you how many HR people I have coming on my mental health courses. I have hundreds of them, because they don't know any more than you do. And it's also absolving your responsibility by saying, oh yeah, I'll just speak to HR and they'll pick it up. You know, I think it is good practice that managers do that, and organisations then are duty bound to make sure that they are training and developing the managers that they've got working for them, so that they have got the skills to have those positive conversations around mental health and well-being. So,
and just on that, Cathy, we have had a really interesting question from the audience, which was, how would you respond if a candidate mentioned their mental health during the interview process?
Well, interesting. So it's in terms of the law, they don't have to. So if they do, that's a real positive step. So if they do mention it, you can have a conversation about it. You cannot discriminate. So you cannot then decide that you can't employ them because of that mental health issue. The most you could do is ask the question, okay, what do we need to know that would help you stay well? You know, do we need to make any adjustments to make sure that you can contribute to our workplace? In the same way that if someone said to you, I've got a nut allergy and I carry an EpiPen, you'd want to know, well, where is it? You know, we need to know where that is, because if you go into a toxic shock, we'd need to access. Same as someone said they were epileptic. What if someone said, well, actually, oh gosh, you know, I'm so sorry, I've just been diagnosed with cancer. How would you deal with that in an interview? They've just come forward and told you. You deal with it in the same way. Okay, what do you need? It shouldn't affect whether you're recruiting that person or not. Good question.
And one more interesting finding that was on our report was that 51% of people felt they were less than a month away from burnout, with 28% saying they're at risk of burnout within a week. So do those stats shock you, and what do you think the reasons are behind it?
Oh gosh, no, I don't think they do. And I think there are quite a few reasons actually. And one of them is that the media are sensationalizing mental health. So they are raising awareness around mental health. So we're all of a sudden, it's a bit like when you do stress management training in an organization, everyone suddenly decides they're stressed because they now know what it is, you know. So I think there is an element that the media is raising awareness around this subject, so people realize that they're actually burning out, and they're sat at home, they've got time to stop and think and reflect. You've got an issue with human beings like to be in control, and in fact, I read it on your stress report. Was it Jim Bright said that how many of us, a third of us, would avoid change if we could, because no one likes change. The only person that likes change is a wet baby. You know, we don't like change, and we have been faced with a perpetual changing environment throughout the pandemic, and we're also being bombarded with loads of bad news. Constantly, we are being faced with yet another, you're going to have a blood clot, or you know, don't have that vaccine, have this one. And it's constant, you know. And I was saying very early on, stop watching the news. I did it myself, and I was watching the news at 10 o'clock at night, and I couldn't sleep because you're going to bed with all this negative stuff in your head. So I think also there is an element of we are using inappropriate coping mechanisms, because we haven't got to drive now because we're all working at home. So we're thinking, well, I'll just have a glass of wine with my meal. That turns into 2 glasses, and then it's shame to waste it. It'll probably go off overnight, so I'll just finish the bottle. And before you know it, you've increased your alcohol consumption. And alcohol, whether we like it or not, it affects our health. It is a toxin. In moderation, it's okay, and depending on what week it is, red wine's better for you or white wine's better for you. The red wine probably is, because it's got polyphenols in it and good stuff. But you know, if we're drinking loads of it, there's a reason why the government have said 14 units maximum a week, and people don't understand what 14 units mean. And they actually think, and I often say to people, and by the way, it's not a target. You know, it's you don't aspire to drinking 14 units. You have a bottle of wine and you've got 10 units in that one bottle. So if you have a bottle of wine over a weekend, you've taken up majority of your units in a week. So I think we're using inappropriate coping mechanisms. I've seen people either going one way where they're doing loads and loads of exercise, or the opposite, where it's, you know, couch to the fridge and back again. That's about it. So I think there's that. There's also a genuine anxiety around COVID itself. I've seen this a lot with people that have said, I didn't have any anxiety before, and now it seems to have increased afterwards. I'm not really sure why. And we know that there has been some research into this, that the fact that COVID is a virus, it is affecting us at a cellular level. And so there is something coming forward now that says it is increasing people's anxiety levels, regardless of whether, and I've got a friend of mine who had COVID, and he said he is not an anxious person, and he said, then I got really anxious about, am I going to recover? And then actually, if I recover, how long is it going to take? And then am I going to go and get it again? So I think anxiety levels are running really high with people at the moment, and then they are isolated from their friends and their family, so they're not having that opportunity to speak to people and engage with people. So I think that's having an impact. Flipping out, how many more can I find? I think managers are not spotting the signs in themselves, never mind in their team, for all the reasons that we've been talking about earlier. And I think there's another one here, that we live in a society of real high achievement and expectation. So I work with some law firms, and the challenge that they have when they're working from home, they don't have a water cooler moment, they don't have a coffee machine moment, because they're sat in their home. And their clients' expectations is, well, you sat at home, so you can do all this work for me. Yeah, and Karen's nodding, she's probably seen this as well. And we think that we're superhuman, and that we're going to put our pants on the outside of our trousers and just keep going forever. And we're not designed to do that. We are designed to have some downtime and to oscillate. And I think these are the challenges that we're seeing with the pandemic and coming out of that moving forward. I'm seeing there's a guy called Owen O'Kane that's now trying to officially get recognised. You've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, yeah, which we associate with war veterans quite a lot. They're now coming up with post-pandemic stress disorder. And that may well become a thing because of the uncertainty, the trauma, the horrific headlines, the fact that we're losing our loved ones as well, the financial difficulties that people are facing. So yeah, it's lots of things in there. So not a surprise. Sorry, Jess.
So just on that, Cathy, what can HR teams and line managers do to help prevent their teams reaching the point of burnout?
So I think that the key to this approach is very much about the how-to. And it's a little bit of what I was saying before. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I see training managers is that they want to go into fixing mode because they're paid to do that. And so I think instead of going into fixing mode, let's listen. Watch out for red flags when people are not doing okay. And also know that you haven't got to fix people. You want to connect with people. You want to listen to them. You want to find out what's going on. Lead by example is a great one, because if you're not managing your well-being, then you're trying to help other people from an empty cup. So it's really important that you do. So, you know, if you're working, surprised if other people think that they need to do that as well. So make sure that you are looking after yourself. Share your own vulnerability. People respond really well when we share how we're feeling about this pandemic, what's going on for us, because we start to connect with people when we show our vulnerability. So and I use a couple of models when I'm training. We call it the stress container in the mental health first aid training. And you can find, if anyone wants to Google it, you'll find this stress bucket, they call it. It was Brabham and Turkington's model. And this is brilliant because it's really simple. It basically says we all face a load of stress, and stress is whatever it means for us, isn't it? So what stresses me out is not going to stress you out. So, and we have this container, and our stresses flow into our container or our bucket. And depending on the size of our bucket depends whether it's going to overflow. And if you've got, you know, we have different size containers, different size buckets, which are influenced. It's a metaphor, by the way. It's influenced by our background, our upbringing, our childhood, the experiences that we've had, our nurture, our nature. And so it affects the size. Now, if you've got one of your members of your team whose container is fairly small, then don't be surprised if you give them more work and they're struggling with it because it's overflowing their container. And we have these, we have a tap on our buckets, which is, we talk about there being helpful coping strategies or unhelpful. And so when you talk about helpful coping strategies, yeah, we're getting exercise, we're not eating too much cake, we're making sure that we're sleeping right, we're engaging with our friends and family and colleagues, that's great. But what about the unhelpful ones, where we are drinking a little bit too much, that we are withdrawing, that we're not recognizing that actually our containers are overflowing and it's now causing us a problem. So this is a great model to use with your teams. Just get them to check in with them now and again. What's in your bucket? What's overflowing? Yeah, what coping mechanisms do you have? Because I always ask the question, can you increase the size of your bucket, or actually do you get better at coping with it? And for me, I think it's you learn better coping strategies, don't you, rather than increasing the size of the container. And then this final one, I'm sure many of you have seen this, you know, the circle of control model, Covey's circle of control. It's like three, what's it called, concentric circles. So the middle circle is the control circle. And actually, if you look at what's going on in your life and you think about where does it sit, there's actually not very much that we can actually control. So it's in the middle. Then you've got, on the next level out, you've got a circle of influence. And we don't realize sometimes how much influence we actually have over our well-being, for example, or over our situation. So for example, in your circle of influence, you might be sat at home thinking, oh, you know, my manager doesn't understand me and I'm really struggling with this and it's his fault or her fault, and you're not having a conversation because you don't realize that you can have that conversation and you have got that ability to influence. And so you end up procrastinating. We all do this, by the way. You end up procrastinating instead of doing some influencing. So we want to increase the size of our influence. And then the outside circle is the one of concern. And let me tell you, if it's in your outside circle, why are you spending any energy on it? Because if it's of concern to you, there's probably not much you can do about it. And it's a bit like COVID is of concern to us. We can't get rid of it. We can't change it. We can only affect our reaction to it, can't we? We can only affect how we respond to it. and then influence what we do. We can go down to the chemist and get some flow tests if we want. You know, this is influence. Or we can sit at home and worry about it rather than get a test to go, oh yeah, okay, I'm negative today. So these are just a couple of models that I share them quite often, and people just find them so valuable because they're simple, they're practical, and they work. And the circle of control, I add in another one, which is LID, which is basically leave it, influence it, or do it. So it's in your circle of control. Stop procrastinating and get on with it. Do it. If you can influence it, do that. And if it's in your concern, then forget it. Just leave it, because there's nothing you can do. And you're wasting your energy if you're spending your time worrying about something that you can't control. So, yeah, a few things in there.
Thank you, Cathy. I'm just seeing all the panelists' faces. We're all nodding as if to say, we know we need to do some of this. Thank you. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and we will head into some questions from our audience, if that's okay. So the first one, which I think will best sit with you, Karen, is how did you demonstrate that you had invested in your new recruit? What did that look like?
So this was very much at interview stage, because that was how she made that key decision. So there was a couple of things. We spent some time with her working out when was the best time for her to be interviewed and where was the best place, bearing in mind some of that started whilst COVID restrictions were still in place. And we, because we have flexibility in the hours that we worked, the people who are interviewing have flexed their hours so they could suit her. That worked really well. We have quite a robust interview process, but through some of the psychometric testing, for example, that we did, we over provided examples of how to do it, test yourself in this space, and that type of thing. When we have an interview stage where candidates need to prep for it, we talked about what she had going on in her life at that particular point in time, and therefore what was reasonable for her to be able to prep for this, rather than saying, here it is on the Sunday, and by the way, the interview's on the Tuesday. So it was all things like that. And then in the interview side, not only did we go into a classic competency type interview, we really talked about her as an individual. So what she considered her motivators to be, what she enjoyed outside of work, how that connected to in work. We even went into things like how does stress manifest itself in her, and let's understand what her triggers were, because actually she would be joining a team that she wouldn't meet for considerable periods of time because of lockdown. So we just spent a lot of time talking about her as an individual, but flexing the recruitment process as well to really suit her and what was going on in her world. She was employed, she was a parent, she was, you know, somebody's partner, all of that, and chuck COVID in the mix as well. For us to be, well, we're working this to our timeline because we want to recruit somebody, just isn't the way that was going to work right then. And it worked for us. You know, she chose us, so which is brilliant.
I want to come and work for Reed. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you, Karen. And our next question for you, Vicky. I've been replacing people who left through COVID, and every single one wants and is getting flexible working. Biggest challenge is how we integrate these people into the team when we're not all in the office together.
I think it's really interesting, and whoever's putting the question, great that you're giving them flexible working. So I think a massive big tick to start with. I think it takes time and effort, and it's not easy. There's not, again, this stuff isn't easy, is it? We're learning, everybody's learning as we go, but I think making more of an effort with remote onboarding, so providing materials up front, literature about your organisation, welcome packs, you know, we've sent out welcome gifts to new starters so that they feel like they're wanted and needed before they even arrive, making sure that the first day is, you know, highly supportive, so that somebody's there on a Teams call or a Zoom call straight away, welcoming them, making sure there's the informal stuff that you perhaps would have done in the office, you know, the virtual lunch and the natter and the get to know. We've played quite a lot of games in Westfield around getting to know each other, you know, doing things about truths and lies and all that. So doing lots of the informal, getting to know each other's sort of tasks tasks as well, as then trying to teach people, you know, the basics of the job. And I think understanding it takes longer. So if in the old world it would have taken, you know, a couple of months for people to pick up who everybody is, accept that it's going to take longer. Regular check-ins with your new people. What do they want? How do they see their first couple of weeks going? Some people want people sort of virtually on their shoulder all the time. Other people are like, I'm all right and I'll come to you when I need you. And again, remember, buddy system. So it's not always the line manager. Who else can be that virtual buddy, as you perhaps would have done in the office too? I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that, Karen, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, the one thing our L&D team, which have done, is fantastic, is they've created this app where, as a new starter, I can go in and answer all these questions, and it will create an induction that's personalised to me, that's over and above what a line manager might do. And everything that's on that induction is all virtually available. So for me, I think also what's great is employees having the control, some control over that induction period as well. And I think I go back to just don't assume anything here, especially now. You might find a new starter absolutely wants to be in a physical workplace with somebody 100% of the time, and equally you might find they don't. So I think it's very quickly, before they start, having that conversation with them to understand how they want their induction to work, and building it and agreeing between you mutually how that might play out over the next coming weeks.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder to people, on the chat function, we've had a few questions about wellbeing calendars, and there's an example provided on there, a link that you can go on to. But the next question is, and I guess this could be open to any of our panelists, did anyone have a struggle to get senior management to buy into wellbeing and mental health and the urgent need to do this?
Yeah, yes, yes, I do. I do see it, because I see people being trained and they've been sent, which tells you that maybe the organisation thinks it's a tick box exercise. And that tells you that maybe the senior management haven't understood that this is not a tick box exercise, and that actually if they want to change the culture and they want their corporate social responsibility, then actually it does require that they understand as well. So what I always say to people is that there are other things that you can do for senior directors and managers without training them as mental health first aiders. You can do like a half-day awareness, and they can come along and learn about mental health and learn how to have a conversation with some of their employees. And that always 100% of the time goes down a storm, because they understand then what we're talking about. So I think there are things to do, and I think there is a way to go as well. In some cases, it is a tick box exercise. But interesting, Karen, how have you got your senior managers and directors to buy into the wellbeing that you're doing at Reed?
Well, I'm probably incredibly lucky and in a slightly unique situation, whereas Ian, who's our global MD, used to be the Chief HR Officer for Reed. So by default, I'm knocking on an open door. And he's made it incredibly easy for us to really define what we want our approach to be. But also he's incredibly intuitive and is good at having conversations and catching where he thinks people might be under points of pressure, and then also trying to put solutions in place. So it's very much led from the top at Reed, and I'm very lucky with that. Also, we're a family business, and that family element trickles through all of the levels, and that really helps too, because it just changes the culture that we have in that particular place. So that's a very twee answer and a bit of a throwaway one, saying I'm very lucky because I had Ian. But I just think that he gets it. So I think for me, if I was there for introducing it to somebody else, it would be really breaking it down into layman's terms and connecting some of the different data points that we've got, whether that's using sickness absence data that we've got, whether that's using a co-member survey that we've got. I'd pull different bits from that to feed that up to the senior leadership team to help build the business case for change.
Yeah.
I don't know, Vicky, whether you've got anything you want to add from a HR perspective.
Yeah, I think similar to you, Karen, very lucky. Obviously, we're a health and wellbeing organisation, so if we don't practice what we preach, actually, we're very, we're hypocritical. Saying that, it doesn't mean to say that we don't have our own struggles like any other organisation. So I think, as you said, it's trying to link that to data points, and I think thinking about performance and wellbeing and linking the two. So happy, healthy, colleagues are more productive. So it's then linking it back to performance if that's what floats your senior leadership team. And I think basing it on data, so the interventions that you're putting in are making a difference, and that you can prove that with the data that you have.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that point, Vicky, I'm conscious of time, so I'll make this brief, is that it's good practice for when we're training mental health first aiders to actually record the fact that they're having conversations. And this has worked really effectively for a public sector company where, and of course you have to protect GDPR, you can't just start writing loads of notes and names down, but you can say, on this day I met with X and we broadly discussed depression, anxiety, and this is what happened as an outcome, and I'm going to check in with them in 3 days' time. You've got a digital record that you did something, and now if that data then gets fed into the central pot, you can start linking that to, how does that link to the fact then that people are going off sick with depression and anxiety? And this is what this public sector organisation did. They recorded how many conversations they were having. They recorded how many of them were in different areas like depression and anxiety. They recorded that there were 5 people who had a plan for suicide, to take their own life, which was scary. And then 2 of them were very serious. So by having these conversations, they saved 5 people's lives who had that intention to end it. And they were then able to record that data, record all the conversations that they've had, do some clever stuff from an analysis point of view, link it to absenteeism figures, and we're able to at the end say, we have saved this company 30 grand because we had mental health first aiders having these conversations. That was really clever. And that's what you can do if you link it and put the bottom line results in of the investments that you're making, which is what your directors and senior teams want to hear. It's like, what's the return on the investment here if we're going to do this? So.
Thank you, Kathy. And we are unfortunately out of time. I know that's gone very quickly, but we are coming towards the end of the session now. So hopefully we have answered some of the questions that have come in, because we did have quite a few of the similar questions. So after today, in fact, firstly, a massive thank you to our audience for the great questions. We hope you found it useful. We'd love to hear your feedback, and a link survey should appear on your screen after the webinar ends, and you'll receive an email with that, with the recording in there as well. If you would like to book an appointment to discuss your wellbeing requirements, you can fill out a form that's on the chat box now. And also, if I just share my screen with you, I'll give you the contact details. Hopefully that has popped up for you now. But yes, a massive thank you to our panel today for sharing their expertise. Hopefully some of the free resources in the handout sections will come in useful after this discussion today. And as always, we'd massively appreciate your feedback. So we really would appreciate your time filling out our survey. But thank you, everyone. And any further questions, please feel free to reach out to the contact email that's provided on the screen. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.